What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Extra Innings Podcast. I'm your host, Elijah Rodriguez, and we're back today on this beautiful Friday. We got another episode for you guys. This one's a little different. I'm going to be talking more about a topic that I think is at the top of a lot of people's lists, especially as we head into the summertime. Players are kind of going into an off season, some still playing. But I did want to talk before we got into that because I like to obviously talk baseball news, and we have to say that the Yankees yesterday was pretty much the biggest piece I think I saw yesterday, besides the game at Rickwood between the Cardinals and the Giants. What a great game. That was awesome to see. My buddy John King actually pitched yesterday, so it was pretty cool to see him pitch out there. But it's just that was just that was awesome. Yeah, watching them play at Rickwood was, I mean, obviously where the Barons played, the Negro Leagues, it's all history in there, so that's pretty cool. But the bigger topic, I think, is that the Yankees got their asses kicked 17-5 yesterday. Everyone thought that was going to be a really good series, and the Yankees lost that one. They won the first game of the series and got beat the next night on Garrett Cole's comeback, and then last night was last night. Luis Gil, who's been leading the AL with ERA in pretty much every pitching category, been absolutely dominant all year. Just left his talent at home yesterday. I don't know what happened. It actually raised his ERA up to 2.77, which is still good, but it's a far cry from when it was like a 180 or something like that, like a 2 flat. Obviously, we're going to see that rise. He was never going to stay below that or stay that low for that long. It's almost unheard of. But you know, I never thought he'd stay that low. I knew it was eventually going to rise, but this fast on an outing like this is pretty tough. He went 1.1, so 1 1/3, 8 hits, 7 runs, 2 walks, and 1 strikeout in 1 1/3. So didn't have it yesterday, and the whole thing with that was it was bad. That kind of set the tone, right? When your starter goes out there and does something like that, 7 runs in the first 2 innings, it's kind of tough to come back. But we'll reset. The Yankees will reset, and they'll come back. But that was tough to watch. But anyway, I had to talk about it. I had to at least talk about that because that was something, man. But anyway, today with all my players, if you're a player, if you're a parent of a player who's getting ready to play this summer, first of all, stay cool because it's freaking hot, especially if you're in Texas. My God, it's hot. But the biggest thing I've heard, and this is something that actually wrote an article. I need to go back and find it. I wrote it for fucking Baseball Express, but I might go jack it back because that is all my. I did like a whole ass case study for this thing because I was like me and when I wrote it, it was back in it was 2022. I think late 2022. I was getting into like a lot of arguments with people because I was going through this thing where I was like still playing, and then I was going and playing in some competitive leagues, and I was trying to get my arm kind of back up and in shape, which I did, but it's very evident my arm is not what it used to be when I was, 18 to 21 years old. My arm is kind of fried. So, but back in that time, like I said, I was feeling healthy. I'm still now, as I was in 2022, probably in the best shape I've ever been in my entire life. Even when I'm in better shape now than when I was actually a collegiate athlete, which is crazy. I think if I had the physique and the body I have now, and I played college with the same like arm health I had back then, it would have been a different story, but nonetheless. But so I was kind of going through this thing where I was like, okay, I'm gonna start throwing a couple days a week. I was actually catching a lot of bullpens for some pro guys. We were doing some workouts, so I was being pretty active in baseball for a while. And I thought, okay, well, if these guys are doing certain things, I'm gonna start trying and seeing if these things work. Obviously, I wasn't gonna go pro. I wasn't gonna try to make a run because I needed a job. I need all the stuff I was doing then. So I wasn't trying to be like, I'm gonna go play like indie ball or do something crazy. No, I was doing this stuff strictly on like a case study basis. I was just like, let me see if this actually works. Does my arm feel better? Do these things work? And there's a guy on my men's league team, and I always would tell him because he's a big believer in throwing weighted balls, like plyo ball training, and he lives for it. Ex college guy. He's like, I have to do this before I start. It helps my arm get loose, blah blah blah. And I'm like, hey, to each their own, right? I'm not going to sit here and go at somebody and be like, that's dumb, that doesn't make sense, because most of the time I voice my opinion, but I was like, you know what? Baseball is different. You do what you got to do. I'll do what I got to do. We're good. But then he started kind of coming at me. He was like, man, this is like the best thing. Why don't you do this? Like, you already throw hard. You should throw harder, blah, blah. So he's like, so I was like, you know what? I see some of the pro guys doing some weighted ball stuff. I'm going to break down. I'm going to buy a weighted ball set, and I'm going to see if this is real. So I think it was like the whole summer up into that late 2022 point, it was like probably like June all the way through like August, September, and then I wrote the article. I was doing weighted balls 2 times a week, plyo ball training. I had a program, and I was doing it. And I did see, and this is where things get interesting because a lot of people are, and this is kind of the segue into the question because I have a lot of people, parents, players asking like, "Hey, should I throw weighted balls? Will weighted balls increase my velocity? What's going to get me to throw harder?" Because like if you haven't noticed, if you're a parent, if you're a player, right now the game is obsessed with velocity and who's going to throw it hard and who's going to hit the hardest. The game's kind of moving in this weird direction, kind of away from like America's pastime or the baseball that we've grown to love, where you play small ball. Like I remember the other day, like seeing somebody bunt in Major League Baseball seems foreign. It seems like, whoa, what is that? Like what's going on? Like we've moved away from this like move people over, like play the game of baseball to like let's see who can throw the hardest and who can hit the hardest. And that seems to be the where baseball's at right now, which is fine. Like baseball's in a good spot. It's exciting. It's fun. People like to watch this kind of baseball. So I'm for it. I'm all for it. But with that comes consequences, especially not so much on the hitting side, but on the pitching side. And we're seeing it hand over fist over and over and over again this year with the Tommy John. We just lost another guy. Bradish is down with Tommy John. I mean, we've missed Strider, Bieber, not even the slew of guys who are out now who are trying to make the recovery. We lost Urquidy. So a lot of guys, Garrett Cole had an issue with his elbow, obviously, earlier this year. So the arm issues are there, and there's a reason. Now, some of these guys, I can't sit here and tell you that it's attributed to weighted balls because I don't know what their program or what their throwing stuff consists of. So I'm not even going to act like that's a thing. I'm talking strictly from my studies and what I've done physically to tell you, right? So I started throwing these weighted balls around 2 days a week. I had a program. It was like throwing to the back. We were doing different movements, different weights. It wasn't all like mega heavy. We're doing super light, ultra light, and kind of working through these different movements and throws. And one thing that I did notice was, yes, my velo increased. It went up a lot. It went up a lot. It went probably up like 4 miles an hour in that span of like 4 months, consistently throwing on Sundays, throwing once or twice a week, long tossing, and throwing weighted balls. And this is obviously all post baseball career. I hadn't played in years. I'm doing this afterwards, right? So I'm throwing. I'm like, wow, okay, my velo is really jumping here. Like there's a correlation to this. This works, but, and this is what I'll say, but. So the velo jump I did have. But what I will say is that my arm has never hurt more than when I was going through that period. And it wasn't like elbow pain because like my elbow's jacked. I need Tommy John, so I know my elbows. So I take every elbow pain that I have with a grain of salt because it's already torn up in there. So I'm like, I don't know if this is just me hurting or if what I'm doing right now is attributing to this pain because I can be sitting here typing or something, and if I don't move my arm for a while, I have to like kind of like stretch it out and then wait for the pop, and then I'm like, all right, I'm good. I'm back to normal again. But a lot of times, I kind of take elbow pains with a grain of salt. I'm not saying you should because hey, if you're an active player and you have elbow pain, go get it checked. But I know my diagnosis. I need Tommy John. I've had a UCL tear, so I know that my elbow's pretty jacked up. I just didn't want to get surgery because I can't fathom right now post playing career sitting in a freaking cast for no reason when I can do everyday tasks. I can still lift. I can do everything I want to do. Just some days are better than others. Anyway, besides the point. So my arm I started getting this like gnarly bicep pain. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, this is weird. Like, this is strange. And I kept on going because a lot of people were like, it's just like soreness. And this is where I talked about it the other day, where it's important for athletes to know the difference between pain and soreness. Was that I kind of went to a couple guys, talked to a couple of my pro guys, like, hey, man, I'm feeling this bicep pain right here. Like my arm felt dead. I was like, couldn't throw because I was throwing so much. And they were like, it seems like it's just sore. Like, just work through it. Like, you'll be all right. Like what? I mean, it's like, I'm obviously not going to expect them to be like, all right, let me diagnosed. But I was like, hey, you feel this pain? Have you ever felt this? Like, well, if it's in your bicep, it shouldn't be that serious, which is kind of like the norm, right? If it's in your bicep, it's not bad. If it's in your elbow, it's bad. If it's in your shoulder, it's really bad. That's kind of like the consensus around baseball these days, or at least the old school way of thinking. Shoulders bad, biceps okay, elbows bad. So I was like, okay, whatever. So I kept throwing and kept throwing. And eventually came to the point where I was like, man, I can't fucking throw. This hurts so bad. So I had to take like 6 weeks off from pitching that year in 2023. I was like, man, I can't do, or like late 2022 into 2023, I kept up the same program, but my elbow was fucked. My bicep was jacked up. And I was like, okay, there's got to be a correlation because my arm is fine. I've never done a weighted ball program before, and all of a sudden I'm throwing way harder, but my bicep feels like it's going to snap in half. And that was painful as shit. So I took 6 weeks off. This is post article. So I wrote the article up to that point and kind of included different things, but then I kind of kept on doing it because I thought, okay, if I can keep this up and just kind of do it a different way, maybe I can keep the velo. And because it was fun, I had a good time doing it. Anything baseball training, I have a great time. So I was like, okay, I'm going to keep on doing this. And that's when kind of the arm pain kind of came about in about January, right before our men's league season started. So I was like, yeah, I need to take some time off. This is not good. So then I started kind of doing some more research. And in my research, of course, because like I was looking at a lot of different case studies, like like guys from Harvard and MIT who were talking about this kind of stuff with sports performance and kind of this whole thing to Tommy John, because this whole thing with Tommy John is blown up. It's huge. You have all kinds of scientists and doctors talking about it. I mean, because it's an epidemic at this point. If you're a baseball player, like it almost feels like it's inevitable one day the day will come where you will have Tommy John, especially if you're a pitcher and you're throwing different pitches, curveball, slider, all that kind of stuff, because it's all stress and putting stress on that ligament, the ulnar collateral, Tommy John, whatever you want to call it. Because that's really what it is. I mean, any curveball you throw, for the most part, sliders especially, it's just all that torque is putting nothing but pressure on that UCL. So pitchers, it seems like, especially with how the injury rates these days are insane. I mean, kids getting Tommy John at like 14, 15 years old, like it's insane. It's insanity. But like, anyway, so, I get the bicep pain and I realize I think this is attributed to weighted ball training. I mean, there's no other variable in this experiment. I've been throwing, I was throwing before, then I introduced weighted ball, started doing that, and then bicep pain, but the velo's up. So that not only solidified my thoughts. So I went up to the guy and I was like, dude, this thing jacked my arm up. And I'm not blaming it on him. I'm just like, dude, I can't do this anymore. Like, I got to stop throwing the weighted balls. And he's like, oh, you might have been doing it wrong. Like, no. Which came to my conclusion, like, if he's done it all this time and has stayed healthy, obviously not a pro guy by any means, but he's able to throw, and he has no pain. Like, I think that the weighted ball thing is pretty much a person to person thing. I can't sit here and say, yeah, you should throw weighted balls. You shouldn't throw weighted balls. I'm not that guy, because what works for you, man. You might go out and throw weighted balls and your arm feels 10 times better and you have no pain. But for me, and I know a lot of other guys, throwing weighted balls is just not conducive to my arm health. Maybe it's the way maybe I train hard, too hard. Maybe I'm throwing it too hard. Maybe I'm doing something. I don't think I am. I've done all the research, like I said. I'm like 99% sure I was doing everything correctly. But I mean, the thing is that, I've looked at multiple case studies again, NCBI, looking at different, Mike Reinold, different guys in the strength training world who talk about this. And it looks like there was different case studies done. There's one that I found here that says one high school baseball pitcher study. There was one done for high school pitchers. This was back in 2021. Found a 24% injury rate after a 6-week weighted ball program, and a significant increase in elbow torque, which can just do nothing but stress the Tommy John ligament. And there was another one in 2022 that was done on weighted ball athletes, that found 25% of the subjects sustained injury to their elbow or shoulder, but most injuries occurred later in the season, not during the program. And that's what I'm saying. This falls directly in line with my diagnosis and what happened to me. I did the training ball program and I was fine. And then it happened weeks later, like not even anywhere close, because I was doing the program, started it for 6 weeks, starting in, I think I said June. Then I did it all the way through about September, August. I wrote the article stating what a lot of other people were saying, where I was on at it. And then I kept going. And then here we go into January and boom, arm problems. So it's not something that happens immediately. It seems like almost like these weighted balls are causing an overuse, or causing something that's going to like increase more stress, because it's a lot more weight on that ligament. When you throw, you're torquing. A lot of guys, sometimes when they throw, they're coming this way, or they're going to come like this, and it's putting a lot more stress because it's weighted, it's heavy, and it's going to make you go more. And this thing flexes backwards, putting nothing but stress here and on the shoulder at times. If you're doing this or you're doing this, that's a lot of stress. It's a lot more weight than a traditional baseball, right? So that's what's causing the torque. But it makes sense. All these studies are on par with what happened to me. It doesn't happen during the program. You feel fine during the program, but it comes at a later time, which makes me feel like it's overuse. But I don't know. So like I said, guys, if you're looking to train, if you're looking to gain velo, there's a lot of different ways. There's a lot of other ways to do it, with strength training, with, agility, speed, all that kind of stuff, fast torque movement, that kind of stuff will help you gain velo without having to introduce weighted balls. Again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I'm simply sharing my story and what I thought would happen to me when I did weighted balls. Like I said, there's a lot of people that live or die by this shit, man. You go to Driveline, you go to Tread, a lot of these places, they love plyo balls, and maybe you do their program and maybe they do it better. Top Velocity is another one. There's a lot of programs that live or die by these weighted balls, and that's fine because they have enough case studies and enough, backing to show that, hey, that we're going to get the results we want. So yeah, I mean, you're going to get the results, but a lot of times you have to just be careful and do them responsibly and truly listen to your body. And no, like if a coach is telling you something to do, or you're going to a strength coach guy and you say, we're going to do weighted balls, and you're like, hey, this fucking hurts. You got to be like, hey, I'm really not feeling this right now. Let's work on something else. Let's do something else. Like, you just got to be able to speak up and speak your mind and let them know, hey, this ain't for me. And it's not for everybody. I think that's something that needs to be talked about more, is that weighted ball and certain kind of training for pitchers and athletes is not the same across the board. It doesn't work around. So if you're looking to gain some velo this offseason, whether that's, this summer, if you're playing summer ball and you're looking to gain, you're looking to go train somewhere, or get a set of plow balls, there's a lot of free information out there, guys. You can go to Driveline, you can go to Tread, you can go to Top Velocity. There's a lot of, different online courses, a lot of things you can take where you can enter in your information and kind of be a remote client of these companies, and you can work on your shit wherever you are. Because I think one's in Washington, one's in Seattle, one's in Louisiana. So they're all over the place, right? But you can do this remote. So it's pretty cool. So if you're looking to do that, I would implore you to check it out. But remember, do it responsibly, know what you're doing, be careful, stretch, and just be responsible throwing weighted balls. That's the only thing I can say, because it's not for me, but I can't say it's not for everybody. But yeah, I was not a fan. And then to back up my substance even more, my experiment even more substance, my experiment even more, 2 weeks ago, I was getting ready to throw, and a guy was like, hey, let's toss a weighted ball around. I was getting ready for my start, because I start every other Sunday for our team. And I'm getting out there, I'm getting ready to pitch, and he's like, hey, let's do a little bit of this weighted ball stuff. And it'd been over a year. Like, really, yeah, it'd been over a year since I touched. I think the last time I threw a weighted ball or did the little program thing was like in February of 2023. And I was like, I can't do this, my arm's fucked. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. So I was like, okay, okay, fine. I'll throw the weighted ball. I thought my UCL was going to snap in half the whole day. I was like, man, this hurts. Luckily, like I said, this shit's already broken, so it recovered pretty quickly. Like, I'm good now. I'll probably go out and pitch in 2 weeks and be good. But that day I really thought, man, this fucking hurts. This doesn't feel very good. And it was swollen. My arm was all swollen up, and my elbow was fat. And I was like, yeah, I can't. Like, once again, weighted balls are not for me. So just know, like, it comes with everybody. I'm not trying to scare people away from weighted balls. I promise that's not the case. I just want to let you know that, hey, they're not for everybody, and that needs to be talked about. That needs to be known. And like I said, if you're interested, if you want to do more research before you kind of start something like that, just type in weighted ball study. There are so many different articles, because I said this whole thing with Tommy John this year, with the amount of guys going down with arm injuries, especially pitchers in the big leagues, everyone is kind of trying to figure out what the underlying issue is. Is it overuse? Is we're doing too much? What is it? There's so many studies right now, and weighted balls is definitely in that category of conversation. So if you're interested, go check it out. But like I said, guys, thanks for listening. A little bit of a different episode today. I kind of wanted to start changing up the content. I know we talk a lot about Major League Baseball. It's baseball season. Obviously, that's going to be a hot topic. But right now, as we're going into summer ball, a lot of guys are starting their training. Some guys aren't playing. They're just going to be strictly training, going to different facilities. So that's great. And this kind of falls in line with that narrative. So yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, especially here on YouTube. We got all kinds of content on there. A lot of kind of funnier videos, a little bit more short form content on TikTok and Instagram, but it's still super cool. But thanks for listening, guys. We're probably not going to have an episode this weekend. I'm going to be golfing today, tomorrow. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be a good time. So not going to be probably around to make any podcast episodes. We may have, like I say, I always leave the door open. We may have 1 or 2 videos. If something crazy happens, I got to talk about it. That will be up there. But, we will wait and see. But like I said, guys, thanks for listening. If I don't hear from you, if I don't post anything, we'll catch you guys on Monday.